Ah, France, a country of wine, revolution, existential dread, and baked goods so good they'll have you questioning every life choice that led you to store-bought brioche. It's a place of towering cathedrals, crumbling chateaus, and the constant quiet judgment of people who say, croissant, correctly. Today we're traveling across France, not by TGV, not by bike tour through wine country, and definitely not in a rented car through the Arc de Triomphe roundabout, but through books. From the smoky cafes of Paris to the lavender fields of Provence, we'll explore the cities, their histories, and the books that have best captured their essence, all without trying to conjugate au revoir on camera. And along the way, we'll confront life's great literary mysteries, like, is ennui an aesthetic or just a bad mood in a striped shirt? Was Marie Antoinette misunderstood or just deeply impractical? And why is every French book either deeply romantic or profoundly depressing? I'm Nick Steves, and this is Dr. Cranky Pants Reads Voyages la Traverse la France. Or something like that. So, grab a baguette, or, a comfortable chair, and let's get into it. First stop, Paris. This episode of Dr. Cranky Pants Travels to France is brought to you by Your True Shelf, the brilliant mind who suggested I take this literary travel show on the road, or at least deeper into the green screen. Because while I may not have the budget for a trip to the French Riviera, I do have strong opinions, dramatic lighting, and just enough memories of the muzzy Learn French video series infomercials to be not troublesome at all. So if you would like to support devastatingly earnest, mildly ridiculous literary content, consider liking, subscribing, or leaving a comment with your favorite French read or your most judgmental food memory. Now on to Paris, where the coffee is overpriced, the architecture is breathtaking, and heartbreak is practically a requirement. Paris, the city of love, existential dread, and overpriced coffee, where every sunset is Instagram-worthy, every conversation sounds profound, even when it's just about laundry, and every cup of coffee costs roughly the same as a college textbook. But if you listen closely, you can hear the existential crises brewing alongside the espresso. But Paris isn't just romance and moody philosophers. It's a city of contradictions, beauty and decay, joy and melancholy, big dreams and tiny apartments. And few books capture that duality better than Bonjour Tristesse by Francois Sagan. Published when Sagan was just 18, this book is the story of Cécile, a 17-year-old living a seemingly idyllic, carefree life with her charming but reckless father on the French Riviera. Yes, even the teenagers in French literature are complicated. Her lazy summer turns tense when her father's latest girlfriend threatens to bring actual order and maturity into their chaotic lives. And she responds with a scheme so perfectly French it could only end in existential despair. But what makes this novel unforgettable isn't just the scandal or the sun-drenched beaches or the elegant self-destruction. It's Sagan's clear-eyed, unsparing portrayal of youthful arrogance, selfishness, and loss. The moment where innocence curdles into regret. As they say in Paris, c'est la vie, c'est tragique, or something like that. Okay, before we slip too deep into existential gloom, let's move on to something a little flashier. Versailles, where the fountains are grand, the fashion is ridiculous, and history reminds you what happens when you seriously underestimate how much cake people can eat. Versailles, where the ceilings are gilded, the gardens go on forever, and the wigs had their own staff. It's a place so extra, so over the top, it makes the Real Housewives look understated. And while most of us know Versailles as a set piece for the French Revolution, today we're zooming in on a woman who somehow became its villain, victim, and fashion icon all at once. Enter Marie Antoinette, The Journey by Antonia Fraser. Fraser's biography isn't just a blow-by-blow of royal excess. It's a nuanced, surprisingly tender portrait of a teenager shoved into the most public marriage on earth, expected to charm an entire nation with zero training, a language barrier, and a husband who'd rather tinker with locks than, well, anything else. Versailles was the original fishbowl, and Marie Antoinette was the fish, the queen, the scapegoat, the woman whose every outfit, indulgence, and awkward misstep got turned into national gossip, and eventually, revolution fuel. Now, Fraser doesn't excuse her, but she does show how much of Marie's so-called frivolity was a coping mechanism, a way to survive the unbearable pressure that was never truly hers to shape. And yes, there were cakes, and sheep, and a weird fake village she built so she could cosplay as a milkmaid. But there was also grief, isolation, and a growing sense that no matter what she did, she was always one step behind what France wanted from her. So if you've ever looked at a historical villain and thought maybe she was just underdressed for a system designed to eat her alive, Fraser's take might just surprise you. Also, powdering your hair white was a choice. We don't have to ignore that. Now pack your secrets and smuggling routes because we're headed to Marseille, where the sunlight is sharp, the crime fiction is gritty, and the fish stew might just have something to hide. Marseille, the city that smells like salt air, espresso, and the faint possibility of a bad decision. France's oldest city, where the sun is hot, the past is tangled, and if you're not careful, you'll find yourself mixed up in something that started 400 years ago and still isn't resolved. It's a place built for stories about survival, loyalty, and the kinds of secrets that age like questionable wine. Which brings us to Total Chaos by Jean-Claude Izzo. Total Chaos kicks off Izzo's legendary Marseille trilogy, and it's everything you want from Mediterranean noir. Gritty, passionate, and soaked in atmosphere. This isn't the postcard version of the French coast. It's the underbelly, the real city. At the center of it all is Fabio Montel, an ex-cop turned reluctant avenger caught between the pull of old loyalties and the grim realities of corruption, violence, and betrayal. It's a world where friendships crack under pressure, justice slips through your fingers, and even the sea feels a little dangerous. So basically, perfect beach reading. If you like your beaches with a side of existential despair and two kinds of organized crime, that is. So, if you're ready to wander through sun-bleached streets, backroom bars, and dark corners where even the graffiti looks tired, Total Chaos is your ticket. Just maybe keep an eye on your wallet. Now, after all that danger and drama, how about something a little more peaceful? To Provence, where the biggest threat is probably an aggressively fragrant lavender field. Provence, the part of France where the skies are watercolor, the air smells like thyme and wildflowers, and even your regrets feel poetic. It's the literary equivalent of sipping chilled rosé on a stone patio while a cicada screams in the background like it's part of a spoken word performance. This is summer reading territory. Not the beachy kind, but the kind with dusty paths, creaky shutters, and just a hint of heartbreak tucked between the lavender bushes. Which brings us to My Father's Glory and My Mother's Castle by Marcel Pagnol. These two memoir novels are gentle, vivid portraits of the author's childhood in early 20th century Provence, where long summer days stretched out like storybooks and every hill seems to have a memory waiting at the top. They're stories of family, of growing up, and of falling in love with a place so completely that it becomes a part of who you are. There's no sweeping drama here. Just sun-dappled moments and a slow, steady ache of nostalgia that sneaks up on you like the scent of rosemary on the breeze. Think of it as a love letter to a lost world, one where children roamed freely, adults were flawed but tender, and even the smallest things, a shadow, a silence, a shortcut through the hills, felt significant. So if you've ever wanted to disappear into a memory that's not quite yours but feels like it could have been, these books are your portals. But let's trade our rosemary-scented daydreams for something with a little more drama. And a lot more marble nudity. The Louvre, a temple to art, beauty, and let's be honest, some truly chaotic life choices by all the people who made that art. If you think today's celebrities are messy, may I introduce you to the Renaissance painters and 19th century sculptors? These people could craft a masterpiece in the morning and ruin their lives by dinner time. But that's what makes them interesting, or so I'm told. And today's literary stop brings us to Loving Modigliani, The Afterlife of Jean Hébertini by Linda Lappin. Also, Jean, sorry, totally butchering your name. Now, Amedeo Modigliani, the tragic Italian artist who lived in Paris, was iconic for his long-necked portraits, his scandalous personal life, and his truly catastrophic choices in love. But Jean was his final muse, a young, talented artist herself who loved him fiercely and whose life ended in one of the most heartbreaking tragedies in art history. Lappin imagines her spirit wandering through the afterlife, tangled in grief, art, and unfinished dreams. It's a novel that gives voice to women too often overshadowed by the great man myth, and it paints Paris, specifically the Bohemian world, with all of its heartbreak, beauty, and the ambition you'd expect from a city that believes in both grandeur as well as gossip. So if you've ever looked at a famous painting and thought, there's no way this artist wasn't a complete and utter mess, you're gonna feel at home right here. Now, dust off your metaphorical beret because we're heading north to Normandy, a land of beaches, battles, and lingering ghosts. Let's go. Welcome to Normandy, land of dairy, D-Day, and deep emotional reflection. This is where history doesn't just linger, it camps out and stares you down. It's beautiful, but in that quiet, haunted way that makes you want to whisper, even when no one's around. And the book that fits this energy? Suite Française by Irene Nemirovsky. Written during the early years of World War II, literally as the war was happening, this novel captures the chaos of German occupation and the lives of ordinary people caught in the sweep of history. Now, the author didn't live to see her book published. She was arrested and deported to Auschwitz in 1942, where she died. Her manuscript, thankfully, was preserved by her daughters and published more than 60 years later. So yes, it's a masterpiece, but also a time capsule, a testimony and a heartbreak all in one. This book is powerful because it doesn't glamorize war. It focuses on the fractures, how people turned on one another, protected each other, and tried to survive with dignity in the face of unimaginable change. And in Normandy, where the fields still remember the boots of soldiers and the hush of grief that still drifts in with the fog, it feels especially resonant. So if you're looking for a book that will break your heart, stitch it back together and then whisper, remember, this is the one. Next stop, Montmartre, where the chaos is much less about war and far more about bohemians, bad decisions, and literary drama. And welcome to Montmartre, Paris's most famous hub for creative chaos, questionable hygiene, and big artistic dreams that frequently crash into the reality of unpaid rent. It's the kind of place where you can starve for your art, but also just plain starve. Which brings us to Down and Out in Paris and London by George Orwell. Before Orwell gave us dystopian nightmares like 1984, he lived through a very different kind of horror, working brutal, back-breaking jobs just to afford terrible coffee and slightly moldy bread. In this semi-autobiographical memoir, Orwell plunges into the seedy underbelly of Paris's restaurant kitchens and London's grim lodging houses, painting a vivid, unflinching portrait of poverty, survival, and resilience. It's raw, it's grimy, and it's a reminder that for every sparkling postcard of Paris, there's someone downstairs peeling potatoes for 14 hours a day and trying not to pass out. What makes Down and Out so compelling isn't just the grit, it's the empathy. Orwell doesn't romanticize suffering, he shows the cost of it. Emotionally, physically, and spiritually, all while somehow finding moments of humor, stubborn pride, and human dignity along the way. So if you've ever imagined yourself living that bohemian artist life in Paris, this book will either harden your resolve or send you running straight for a steady office job. No judgment either way. All right, let's dust ourselves off, refill our metaphorical wine glasses, and head to Bordeaux, where the family drama is just as rich as the Merlot. Bordeaux, where the wine is serious, opinions are even more serious, and somewhere someone's great aunt is still holding a grudge from 1978. This is a place where history is layered like a perfect millefeuille. That's how you say that, right? And our next book fits that feeling perfectly. The French House by Don Wallace. Picture this. Two broke Americans impulsively buy a crumbling house on a tiny island off the coast of France. No real plan. No real money. Just a dream and maybe a questionable grasp of how home ownership actually works. What follows is a decades-long love affair with the island, with the house, the people, and a slow, chaotic, hilarious education in patience, resilience, and some really bad plumbing. But beyond the inevitable mishaps, and there are many, Wallace captures something deeper. How can a place burrow its way into your life? How belonging isn't something you buy, it's something you build. Year after year, heartbreak after heartbreak, awkward neighbor interaction after awkward neighbor interaction. So if you've ever romanticized the idea of packing up your life, moving to a crumbling house in a picturesque village, and immediately discovering you don't know how to fix anything, this book's for you. All right, pour yourself another glass of Bordeaux, you've earned it, and let's head to Strasbourg, where the language gets complicated and so do the questions of identity. Welcome to Strasbourg, where the croissants are French, the architecture is German, and the existential confusion is very, very real. This is a city that's changed hands so many times, even its buildings seem to have an identity crisis. Half-timbered houses whisper in Alsatian, cathedrals echo in French, and somewhere in the background, a bureaucracy debates it all in a perfect EU-accented English. So what better book to capture this blend of memory, place, and evolving identity than The Years by Annie Ernaux? This isn't your typical memoir. It's a sweeping, kaleidoscopic portrait of post-war France told through fragments, snapshots, and collective memory. The author doesn't just remember her life. She remembers what it felt like to be a woman in France, a daughter in a shifting society, a body shaped by time and culture. It's the kind of book that makes you want to dig out old photos, listen to the background noise of your childhood, and maybe write a long letter to your former self in 3 languages. If you've ever felt like you were made of multiple places, times, or selves, or if you've ever tried to explain where you're from and needed a pie chart to do it, this one's for you. Now let's trade memory for mystery as we head underground to the most elegant ossuary in Europe, Paris's Catacombs. Hello, Paris Catacombs, where history isn't written on monuments, but stacked neatly in the walls. You know, just a few million bones artfully arranged under the city because someone thought, well, you know what Paris needs? A subterranean setting to provide nightmare fuel. And if you're looking for a book that captures that haunting weight of history, the way personal horror and national trauma intertwine, you can't do much better than The Kindly Ones by Jonathan Little. This novel doesn't tiptoe through the dark, it dives headfirst into it. Told from the perspective of a former SS officer, The Kindly Ones forces you to sit with the unbearable. Complicity, monstrosity, the slow erosion of morality when cruelty becomes bureaucratic. It's massive, brutal, and frankly, sometimes overwhelming. But that's kind of the point. Like the Catacombs themselves, Little's novel forces you to confront the past head-on, bones and all, without the comforting distance of time or moral superiority. So if you want a reading experience that's heavy, harrowing, and unforgettable, and you're ready to sit with some serious darkness, the Kindly Ones will take you there. No flashlight required. All right, let's shake off our cobwebs, dust off our existential dread, and head topside, back into the Parisian sunlight for one last bittersweet stop. And just like that, our literary tour of France comes to an end. We've wandered the boulevards of Paris, dodged existential crises in Montmartre. I have messed up how many French words? And we've gotten suspiciously close to crime scenes in Marseille and maybe, just maybe, accidentally joined a revolutionary plot or two in Versailles. All without leaving the comfort of our armchairs. No jet lag, no getting side-eyed for mispronouncing croissant, or any of the, 80 gazillion other words I have mispronounced in this entire video. Books have this incredible ability to transport us, not just to places, but into histories, identities, and lives we may not otherwise touch. And when it comes to France, the stories are endless, and endlessly complicated, beautiful, infuriating, and irresistible. A huge merci to Your True Shelf for inspiring this chaotic literary French field trip. And as always, if you enjoyed the ride, hit like, subscribe, or leave me a comment about your favorite French read. Or roast me for my inability to speak any language outside of the very narrow vocal definition of English. Or, also your most chaotic travel story. I won't judge. Or cry. Probably. I'm Nick Steves. This is Dr. Cranky Pants Reads Travels Through France, and as always, I appreciate you, and I hope life is good. Bonjour!